If the man loves the woman, respects her, then she will guarantee a husband who loves her. If you follow these steps, you'll be guaranteed happiness from the physical and spiritual aspects. Self-discipline and self-control is easy when the soul is grown and developed and is stronger than the body, which is what the practices of religion are all about. Developing your soul so it will be stronger than your body. What you hear about Jimmy Swaggart and Jim Baker shows that there are people whose body is stronger than their soul. But here they were preaching against adultery and preaching the word of God supposedly, and then they're dealing with prostitutes. And for the Muslim, it's the Quran provides the solutions to all these problems that we find in this country: alcohol, drugs, marital problems. Solutions to all the problems are found in the Quran. We are becoming increasingly aware of the problems of alcohol and the disasters that come from it. I mean, wherever you look, there are victims of alcoholism. But please forgive me if I appear to be bragging or anything, but I have to share with you what the Quran does, what the Islam does to us. It's that alcohol is just not in my mind at all. It's out of the question. And this is the most effective way of dealing with alcohol or drugs. There's just no way I will be tempted or even think about trying whiskey or gin or champagne or whatever those things are. It's out of the question. It's just not in my thinking at all. The same with drugs. And there was a demonstration on the TV recently with, what's his name that had Muslims on the TV? Talk about drugs? Geraldo Rivera. He had a bunch of Muslims. They were talking about drugs. And they set the example for, whether from Harlem or something, where drugs are going rampant. And there's just, drugs are not in their mind. Nothing is going to tempt them to use drugs. It's the solution to all problems. And there is a mechanism for it, and the mechanism is that the soul is stronger than the body. Because of all the prayer and the fasting and the things that God has prescribed for us and constitute gifts from God to us. And again, I will ask you to forgive me if I appear to be bragging, but again, I want to share with you what Islam does. Now, in my line of work, working with the United Nations, traveling to different countries in the world, and making a lot of money, the UN pays the highest salaries in the world. When I'm with them on assignment. And I have been to conferences, the American Chemical Society conferences, the American Association for Advancement of Science, and in those conferences, it seems like the prostitutes of the whole town converge on the hotels where these conferences are. And I have looked around, and I see scientists that I respect going up or down in the elevator with prostitutes. And I lose respect for them. And what appears to be bragging is that I can make a statement here in a khutbah in front of you, in a prayer, that I never fell for prostitution, for prostitutes, or dealt with a prostitute. Because it is not in my mind. And Jimmy Swaggart cannot make that statement, or Jim Baker cannot make that statement. Because they are using the wrong techniques. Because of their idolization of Jesus, they nullify their work. If they do anything that may cause growth or development of their soul, it is nullified, as the Quran says, because of their idolatry. Therefore, their body is stronger than their souls. But like with alcohols and drugs, it's just not in my mind. Now, to make that statement absolutely truth, in saying dealt with prostitutes, there was one instance where a friend of mine, a colleague, we went into his room in the hotel in one of the American Chemical Society meetings to get a book or something, and there was a prostitute passing out in the hall, and he called her in his room, and I guess he was bragging or showing off or something, and bargained with her. And I was there witnessing this. This is the extent of my dealing with prostitutes. So Islam and the Quran just solves all these problems and lays down the laws and regulations, and not only teaches self-discipline, but it instills it on you and becomes easy. I mean, it's no problem at all. God says that you can speak up of God's blessings on you. And this is the category where we can share with each other these things, because some people may think it is incredible. When you go in those conferences and if you make a statement like this to the people, it's an incredible statement. And I just couldn't think of a man who, under those circumstances, did not fall after the things I have seen. Under those circumstances, did not fall for prostitutes. The temptation is great. But for the Muslim, there is no temptation at all. It is zero. Doesn't mean a thing. أقم الصلاة. When you talk about marriage in Islam, you cannot avoid mentioning polygamy. And polygamy is allowed throughout history. It was allowed. In the Bible, it is allowed without limits. In the Quran, it is allowed with many, many conditions and strings attached to it. But all I need to say is that the Prophet Muhammad provided the perfect example as far as polygamy is concerned. Muhammad was married to one wife for 25 years until she died. He had only one wife, and he raised all his children with that one wife. And after she died, he married women who had many children, who had no support and no home. They were widows of his friends who died in battle or died naturally, and they needed the support. They were old women. There were only two political marriages, to the daughter of Abu Bakr and the daughter of Umar, his best friends, who insisted, please, you have to marry my daughter. Because this is it's a tribal tradition. In tribal societies, for different tribes to marry and be connected in marriage is important. And this is probably why, after the Prophet's death, Abu Bakr was elected to be the Khalifa after the Prophet. And Umar followed Abu Bakr. And these are the two men whose daughters were married to the Prophet. But the message, the loud message here is that Muhammad spent his life, all his young life, with one wife and raised his children. And then after that, polygamy came into the picture, and there were many special conditions surrounding that. The other subject that I need to talk about is divorce. And I just have to tell you outright that God hates divorce throughout the Quran. Because almost invariably, children are victimized. Even the husband and the wife are victims in divorce. And this is why it is imperative that we follow these regulations that God prescribed for us and avoid divorce at any cost. There's a verse in Quran that says, if you want to substitute a wife in place of another wife. No, that's not the verse, but there's a verse that says, if you dislike your present wife, you may dislike something wherein God has put a lot of good. The verse that I was mentioning before is, if you want to substitute one wife in place of another, which again actually emphasizes monogamy. It says, do not take anything from the first wife back. And this also brings in the matter of security for the wife. Because women have been abused throughout history, and God knows that. And God says in Surah 28 verse 5 that He is for the oppressed and for the rights of the